After days of waiting, the results are in. CBS News and the Associated Press project Joe Biden as the 46th president of the United States. We have your latest election updates right now at 6. And coast to coast, the nation reacts as we look ahead to January 20th. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Yolanda Harris. Now today, the country made history in so many ways. Former Vice President Joe Biden is anticipated to become the 46th president of the United States. From coast to coast, people are taking to the streets, including right here in Columbus. That's where we find Andrew Kinsey, Stephanie Stanovich, and Brittany Bailey. But first, let's get a look at those results and break them down for you. Let's look at this map. First, showing all of the states called by CBS News, making Biden the nation's future commander-in-chief. With the states currently called, Joe Biden has 279 electoral votes to President Donald Trump's 213. Of course, you can see on there 4 states are still gray: Alaska, Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina. In those states, the races are still too close to call, or they're still waiting on a significant number of votes to be processed. Pennsylvania was close too, but here's why the Associated Press called the race there for Joe Biden. The AP called the race after Biden held more than 3,400 vote lead, a 34,000 vote lead, and determined President Trump could not catch up. Biden held a 0.51 percentage point lead late this morning. Under Pennsylvania law, a recount is automatic when the margin between two candidates in a statewide race is less than 0.5 percentage points. Biden's lead over Trump was on track to stay outside of that margin as final votes are counted. So how are the president and vice president-elect and the sitting president responding to the news? Well, both Joe Biden and his running mate Kamala Harris have changed their Twitter bios to read President-elect and Vice President-elect. Biden tweeted, quote, "America, I'm honored that you have chosen me to lead our great country. I will be a president for all Americans, whether you voted for me or not." And Kamala Harris tweeted out this quick video congratulating Biden.
We did it. We did it, Joe. You're going to be the next president of the United States.
And Dr. Jill Biden tweeted out this picture of herself and her husband holding an older sign saying Dr. and Vice President Biden live here. Of course, holding her hand to cover up the vice part on the sign. And you can see Mr. Biden wearing a hat saying, "We just did 46, the number 46. Meanwhile, President Trump's campaign has been relatively quiet today. He sent out this formal statement saying in part, quote, "Beginning Monday, our campaign will start prosecuting our case in court to ensure election laws are fully upheld and the rightful winner is seated." It remains shocking that the Biden campaign refuses to agree with this basic principle and wants ballots counted even if they are fraudulent, manufactured, or cast by ineligible or deceased voters, end quote. The president's campaign released that statement while President Trump spent the day golfing at the Trump National Golf Club in Potomac Falls, Virginia.
Today's news, I haven't really paid much attention. The news is not the law. The Constitution and upholding the Constitution is our law.
From celebrations to protests, thousands of people are taking to the streets in cities across the country. Horns honking, bands playing in the streets, celebrating Joe Biden's win, his projected win. And in South Carolina, Texas, and other states, supporters of President Trump are also gathering. We're closely monitoring that situation and we'll bring you any breaking details as soon as we get them. Meanwhile, we're seeing people gather right here in downtown Columbus. Andrew Kinsey is there right now. And Andrew, what's the mood downtown right now?
Well, Yolanda, over the last few hours, the mood has really changed into a celebratory tone here, with demonstrators making their voices heard both vocally and by demonstrations, as you can tell by the honking of the horns behind me. Take a look here. You can see close to 100 people along High Street here outside the State House. People have been showing up here on and off with flags and signs since about noon today, shortly after news broke that Joe Biden would have enough electoral college votes from Pennsylvania and Nevada to become the projected winner for the 2020 election. The crowd here has been quite mixed, with supporters for President Donald Trump and those here to celebrate President-elect Biden's projected win. And tonight, we have live team coverage for you tonight for this big event today on reaction from those here in the community. Let's begin our team coverage right now with 10 TV's Stephanie Stanovich. She has reaction from those behind me. Stephanie.
Andrew, well, as you mentioned, you can hear right now just how loud this is. Just take a minute here. Listen, you can hear all of the beeping, the honking. People are yelling outside of their car windows. They're yelling outside of the sunroofs. You can see people chanting here. There's some signs that say Biden on them. People are holding up their flags. We've heard many times people yelling, "We did it." We heard people chanting, "This is what democracy looks like." We've had people tell us really their hope for the next 4 years is to just have unity again. We spoke with a woman who is part of Consistency Speaks, just one of the several organizations that are out here right now. And she says that she's from Canton and she was asked to come here to be part of this by her friends who live here. Take a listen.
I love it. Honestly, I mean, you know, this is what democracy really looks like. I mean, this is our right. This is what we are here for. I've been organizing protests all summer, and honestly, this is a win.
While we've been out here, we have not seen Trump supporters. The people we spoke with tell us that they did see Trump signs earlier, but they left a little while ago. And again, like I said, you could just hear how excited people are right now. They're hugging, people are laughing, they're smiling. And like I said, there's several people lined up here. So Andrew, we'll send it back to you right now.
All right, Stephanie, thank you so much. As Stephanie said, many are reacting to today's big news on a change in leadership in Washington to come. Among those reacting tonight, former Columbus Mayor Michael Coleman. He happens to know both the president-elect and vice president-elect. I spoke with him a short time ago. Here's his reaction.
They're people of character, values, believe in democracy, and bringing people together to get things done. And I know Joe and I know the senator will both work well together to do just that. I'm so optimistic about the future of this country. I'm optimistic because we have new leaders that will bring their character, their values, truth and honesty to their jobs. I think the public is so tired of the lies and the dishonesty and the corruption, and it's going to be a new day.
Now, Mayor Coleman tells me while overall this appears to be a big win for Democrats, their inability to turn Ohio blue again shows that there is still plenty of work to do here for them. Let's continue our live team coverage tonight with 10 TV's Brittany Bailey. She has reaction from community leaders. Brittany.
Well, that's right, Andrew. This is a historic day in many, many ways, especially for Senator Kamala Harris. She will now become the first ever female vice president in our country, the first black woman to hold that office, also the first South Asian to hold that office. So a big day for women across this country, especially women of color. And we got reaction today from 2 local community leaders.
It's good to see that all the hard work pays off. And it's good that we can now see that and gives us something to attain to. So I think that she will become, you know, one of those undoubtable figures in history of America from this point on.
And we will have much more reaction from other people in our community. And by the way, this is not the first time Senator Harris has made history. You may recall she was the first black woman to hold the office of Attorney General in the state of California. She also was only the second black woman to be elected to our U.S. Senate. Andrew, let's send it back over to you.
All right, Brittany, thank you so much. As we said earlier, today's demonstration appears to be mostly peaceful here. People from both sides coming to voice their feelings and their right to do that here outside the State House, with Columbus police keeping a very watchful eye from both the ground and the air here. Unclear exactly how long this will continue, but as you saw in the earlier video, it appears to be more of a celebratory tone here tonight for those supporting President-elect Biden. Of course, we'll keep you posted on the developments here outside the State House. For now, let's get it back to you in the studio, Yolanda.
All right, we'll check back with you guys in a bit. Thanks, Andrew. All right, let's bring in a member of the 10 TV team of political experts to expand on the historic nature of this news tonight. Dr. Brianna Mack, Assistant Professor of Politics and Government at Ohio Wesleyan University, as she's joining us now. I want to thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Mack.
No problem. Happy to be here.
All right. Tell me, what was your reaction when you saw it come across the news in the AP that Joe Biden was projected to win? He won Pennsylvania.
So actually, I didn't find out on TV. My grandmother called me, and I found out that way. I woke up, and she said, "Oh, my goodness, Biden won." And she said, "Yeah, Pennsylvania. He took Pennsylvania." So it was actually interesting for she and I to share in that moment.
Nice. What went through your head at that point? Is that what you were expecting, or were you concerned that it could turn out a different way, or what were your thoughts?
I was shocked that it was Pennsylvania that was called before Georgia ended up being called.
Tell me, what do you think? This is a historic moment, as we've been talking about, the first female woman vice president, first African-American as vice president. This is a historic moment. What do you think this does for women in politics?
I think this is a game changer. 48 years ago, Shirley Chisholm was the first woman to run for the Democratic Party. She was the first Black person for a major party. And 48 years later, we have a Black woman, we have a woman of South Asian descent that is vice president. That is monumental.
It absolutely is. When I hear some people talk about Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, their complaint with her is that, oh, she's just too liberal, too liberal. Do you think that that will be the case, or will she be able to win those naysayers over and maybe let's just bring the country together?
I think that she will be focusing on unity. So what we have to remember is the vice presidential position is very limited. But overall, she will be overseeing the Senate, so she can oversee like the meetings, and she also serves as the tie-break vote. And so if the Senate does end up becoming tied 50-50 Republican Democrat, Vice President-elect Harris will have an interesting opportunity to break some ties and perhaps nudge legislation in a more liberal or progressive way.
Let's talk about President Trump. We all know that he has said he will not concede. He does believe that there was something going on, something a little wonky, as you might say, with the voting. None of that has been proven, but those were his accusations, and they plan to file their lawsuits come Monday. What do you think about that, and do you think that there's any leg to stand on here?
Well, it ultimately depends on how much money the Trump campaign, the Trump administration wants to spend on these investigations. So I've actually read reports that talked about that they're talking about getting these lawsuits and getting these investigations started, perhaps in a way to give the president some time to adjust to the realization that his term is coming to an end.
Mm-hmm. He did release...
And that perhaps...
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
Well, I was going to say he did release a statement, and he was talking about how he couldn't understand why the Biden administration, why the Biden and Kamala Harris, why their campaign would want to accept illegal votes. And I don't think that's the case, that anyone wants to accept illegal votes. It's just a matter of trying to prove if there were any, and so far there has not been any evidence of that. What do you think it would take? What would President Trump's administration need to show to prove that there was something illicit about the election results?
The way that the administration would have to demonstrate that there were illegal votes would be to demonstrate that there were votes casted by people who were completely unqualified, ineligible to vote. So he would have to demonstrate that there was rampant voter fraud, like in states or in precincts where provisional ballots were cast by individuals that had absolutely no business voting, and that they were voted. It actually doesn't even matter who they voted for, because when you're going out and you're looking for illegal ballots, there could be illegal ballots that were casted in favor of you or in favor of Biden or even for third-party people. Mm-hmm. So like he has to be focused on looking at illegal ballots everywhere, not just looking at illegal ballots casted for Biden and Harris.
Okay. All right, Dr. Mack, thank you so much for spending some time with us and talking about this. We appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Well, as our guest just explained, not all of the votes are in, and we could wait a while to tabulate the rest of them and to get results from those. And that's because vote counting processes are different in each state, but they have all been laid out and in place in most cases for years. And there's a reason for that. It's to account for elections that may not be easily decided on Election Day, like this one here. So let's take a look at our timeline. First, we have Election Day on November 3rd. Votes can be counted in some states through November 23rd. States then certify their election results, some not until December 11th. Then on December 14th, the electoral votes are cast. January 3rd, the new Congress is sworn in. On January 6th, those electoral votes are counted. And then finally, it's Inauguration Day on January 20th. Now, it is a long wait, but our local election experts say we just need to trust the process.
People really need to trust in a system in which, again, each party there are lawful procedures for challenging votes that one does not think were properly cast. There are lawful procedures for challenging when votes are not counted that one thinks were properly cast. And these are done with rules of evidence, skilled advocates on both sides who know the law, and judges, often federal judges who have lifetime appointments, some from Democrats, some from Republicans, and we allow the process to work itself out.
Well, one of the states still counting votes right now is Nevada. Even though Joe Biden is still projected to win that state, counters are being careful with Clark County, where the state gathered most of its votes.
The next step, and I have communicated with the Secretary of State's office, and they have confirmed that they're going to be asking us for our first report on all voters who voted in Clark County individually, whether it be early voting, Election Day, or through the mail, to them on Monday. And what the Secretary of State needs to do with that is compare it with the other 16 counties in the state of Nevada to make sure that we don't have any duplicates in those that we voted provisionally or that anybody has done anything illegal by voting in two different counties. Once they run that review, they'll send that information back to us on anybody whose ballot shouldn't be counted, and we'll begin to, in an automated fashion, begin to roll in those provisional votes, which probably won't be any earlier than Wednesday of next week.
Well, Nevada continues a 16-year trend for Democrats picking up that western battleground state. Now, some of the outstanding votes in these states still haven't been counted because of problems on the actual ballots themselves. These so-called problem child ballots need to be reviewed because they're still missing a signature or they have a wrong date, for instance. In Philadelphia, officials say there are about 20,000 of these such votes, and they'll need time to make sure they are counted correctly and incorrect ballots are thrown out.
And I just want to be clear to everyone, that it's not like, a microwave dinner. It's not like you just throw around and get instant gratification. Again, it takes time. We're going to be meticulous. We're going to be accurate. And believe me, I want to go home just as much as everyone else wants to go home. But we have to take our time. We have to do it right.
Philadelphia finished counting some additional ballots as late as this afternoon. But President Trump's campaign is not happy with the results of those votes. The president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, says he has a group of poll watchers willing to testify there were issues counting ballots.
That they were uniformly deprived of their right to inspect any single part of the mail-in ballots. As you know, from the very beginning, the mail-in ballots were a source of some degree of skepticism, if not a lot of skepticism, as being innately prone to fraud. First of all, obviously he's not going to concede when at least 600,000 ballots are in question. It's not my job to determine if the ballots are right or not. It's their job. But with a mail-in ballot or an absentee ballot, the burden under law is on the party that's proposing it, which is why it has to be inspected. It's not my, how can I possibly tell you there's fraud or no fraud?
Giuliani says he promises to file a lawsuit in Pittsburgh, as well as possible lawsuits in Philadelphia and in Atlanta. However, election officials and politicians from both parties have said they found no significant issues with the vote tally. Ellen Weintraub, commissioner of the Federal Election Commission, told CNN there were very few substantiated complaints.
State and local officials and poll workers throughout the country really stepped up, and there have been very few complaints about how this election has run. Very few substantiated complaints, let me put it that way. There is no evidence of any kind of voter fraud. There is no evidence of illegal votes being cast. In fact, and you don't have to take my word for it, because people throughout the country, nonpartisan election experts, have come out and hailed this election and how it was run. If you want to look at the state of Pennsylvania, which the president seems to be focused on, Senator Toomey has come out and said that he has seen no evidence of fraud there. The Republican leader of the state Senate there has also said that he has seen no evidence of fraud. They would know. They're on the ground. They're there in Pennsylvania. And there really has been no evidence of fraud. None of the complaints have attached any evidence of fraud. It's really, we should feel very proud of ourselves that we had record turnout, and people did care about this election. They turned out in numbers that were higher than any election in the last 120 years. It was really kind of amazing.
Well, the president has long maintained mail-in voting was rife with fraud, despite evidence to the contrary. He's also claiming fraud in other aspects of the election, which is getting his tweets flagged on Twitter. You can see here minutes ago, he tweeted that observers were not allowed into counting rooms and that millions of mail-in ballots were sent to people who never asked for them. That tweet, among others, were flagged, saying the claim had been disputed. Well, after the Associated Press and CBS News projected Joe Biden to win, we reached out to David Pepper. He's the chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party, for his reaction.
Yeah, obviously we're excited. I think this is, for our lifetimes, this will turn out to be one of the most important days in history, in politics in our country's history.
Chairman Pepper also talked about the impact he thinks Joe Biden will make when it comes to fighting the coronavirus.
Right now, on the day that Ohio had, again, a record number of COVID new cases, and it's clear there's no national plan, there's no strategy, and it's only getting worse by the day by a lot. It was clear we needed new leadership to deal with the pandemic in Ohio and across the country, and I think this new leadership could not be coming at a more important time.
All right, now let's check in with Michael George from CBS News with a look at what's happening across the country.
Across the nation, thousands celebrated the news.
Oh my goodness, I was so excited to find out that Joe Biden is our 46th president.
After Joe Biden became the projected winner of the 2020 presidential election on Saturday, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris made this historic phone call.
We did it, Joe. You're gonna be the next president of the United States.
And the president-elect released a statement saying, "I am honored and humbled by the trust the American people have placed in me and in Vice President-elect Harris." At 77, Biden becomes the first to defeat a sitting president in more than a quarter century. And Harris is the first woman and person of color to win the vice presidency. The decisive blow to President Trump comes as he cites baseless and unsubstantiated allegations of election fraud. He's vowing to wage a legal battle.
These lawsuits will be brought starting on Monday.
The president golfed in Virginia Saturday and tweeted, "I won this election by a lot." Supporters of President Trump rallied in several cities, including Atlanta and in Lansing, Michigan.
Here in President-elect Biden's hometown of Wilmington, Delaware, hundreds of people have been celebrating in the streets for hours.
Many told us they've never felt prouder of their country.
Everyone is in a good mood. We're all ready to move on.
As ballot counting continues, President-elect Biden is leading in the popular vote by more than 4 million. Michael George, CBS News, Wilmington, Delaware.
My colleague Andrew Kinsey is in downtown Columbus, where a lot of people were gathered out there. What was the vibe out there, Andrew, earlier, and what's going on now?
Yeah, Yolanda, earlier today, this really was a tale of two sides. You had the supporters out here for President Donald Trump and those for President-elect Joe Biden. Since then, this has really turned into almost like a drive-through parade right outside the State House here on High Street. You can hear all the horns from the cars, vehicles passing by, honking their horns. There are also a number of people out here with signs and flags that read Biden Harris. A number of people out here. Experts I talked to earlier today say they're not really surprised by this show of support for the Biden-Harris ticket here in downtown Columbus. When you think about it and you look at the numbers, this reflects what we saw in the numbers. The Democrats were able to win most of the metropolitan cities here in the state of Ohio. However, they failed to reach out to the suburban areas, which experts say is a downfall of the Democratic Party because they were not able to pull the entire state to turn blue, which they saw during the Obama run several years ago. So they're not surprised by this turnout here. This has been quite peaceful today. Again, really a celebration for the president-elect Joe Biden. A number of people here. I've seen older, younger people out here. Again, just out here to be among others to celebrate their candidate of choice and his projected win tonight. Yolanda.
All right, Andrew, thank you. You know, people are saying they're not surprised because of the support that Joe Biden had here, but I am surprised by the celebration in the streets all across the country. I mean, I've never seen anything like this with a presidential election once a president, you know, is finally named. Have you experienced anything like this before?
Only back when President Obama won. That is because during that election, you have to remember, it was very energized. There was this massive push to get out to the polls and vote. And in a way, we saw that this time around. Record-breaking early voter turnout across the country. And you also have to remember there was a push by a number of pillars and drum majors in the civil rights movement who pushed people to get out to vote as their lives depended on it. And go back to John Lewis, who died not long ago, whose dying wish was for people to go out and use their right to vote. And we saw that all across the country. A big surprise down in Georgia, where you have 2 Senate seats going to a runoff, and the state really tinkering on turning blue for this presidential election. So this election was very, very energized, and it showed at the polls.
I can still hear the horns honking. The energy is palpable out there. Thank you, Andrew. We'll check in with you in a little bit. We are hearing from Democratic leaders across the country as well. Following the party win, DNC Chair Tom Perez released this statement saying, quote, "The American people chose hope. They chose dignity and opportunity for us all. They chose to build back better. And after 4 years of hate and division, they chose unity." President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris are ready to go to work for American families. Former President Barack Obama, who Joe Biden served as vice president under, also congratulated Biden and his running mate. A spokesperson for him told CNN, quote, he congratulated each of them on their historic victory and told them how proud he was of the campaign they ran in unprecedented times. Not only will Joe Biden make history as the 46th president of the United States, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris is smashing records. Here's Kenny Choi with a look at her background.
You know, this is our country, and we love our country.
This is a monumental moment for former colleagues and staunch supporters of Kamala Harris.
To have someone like her, of her intelligence and depth and her background in the White House, it's a good day for America.
Harris spent part of her childhood in the Berkeley Flats. She became the first woman, first Black, and first South Asian when elected as San Francisco's district attorney in 2003.
She did play a huge role in regards to, you know, my confidence
to run for office.
Bruce Kane has followed Harris's career for decades and is a distinguished professor of political science at Stanford University.
How would you characterize where she stands politically on that spectrum?
On the San Francisco spectrum, she's more to the right, but San Francisco politics is the politics of left and lefter. So she is not lefter, but she's definitely left. And she's to the left of Biden.
Santa Clara County District Attorney Jeff Rosen began working closely with Harris when she became California Attorney General in 2011.
She had said to me, one of the things that's important when you have a job like Attorney General or DA is to figure out your top 3 or 4 priorities and focus on that.
All right, let's check in now with 10 TV's Brittany Bailey with a look at the vice president making history. Brittany?
Well, I don't know if you can hear behind me, but just for the time being, it's actually quieted down just a bit. That doesn't mean the excitement has quieted down, because what we've seen, a lot of people still in their cars, and while now folks were lining the street, they actually have moved into a crowd because we do have a speaker beside us. I'll be honest with you, I haven't been able to hear anything that speaker has been saying, but if you take a look, this is where the crowd has gathered. So still a joyous atmosphere out here tonight, and I do have to mention, especially covering some of the protests that have happened here in downtown right in front of the State House in the past few months, it's a stark contrast in the mood. Obviously, there have been celebratory moments for people who have been out for the protests as well, and coming to have their voices heard, but this is a different atmosphere. Lots of folks of all ages, of all races, of all sexual orientations here to celebrate the projected winner of the presidential race tonight. And I did talk to lots of folks as well about the historic nature of this. Let's look at the history books here. Several check marks for Senator Kamala Harris. She will be the first woman to be the Vice President of the United States, the first Black woman in that office, the first South Asian in that office. And she's someone who, of course, has already made history as the first ever Black woman to be Attorney General for the state of California. Also, only the second Black woman ever elected to the U.S. Senate. I talked to lots of folks out here, including a mother, also 2 women who are engaged to one another and now hope to get married. They were worried about this election and how that might impact that. And I talked to a gentleman tonight who brought his daughter and son, very moved by this. He's from outside of the city, came in tonight and was very quiet, but walked up to me and told me what this win means to him. He says he is from the hometown of Senator Kamala Harris's family in India. So you'll hear from him a little later. For now, we'll send things back to you.
All right, thank you, Brittany. Well, within the past hour, I was able to catch up with Ohio Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. She reacted to the news of Biden's projected win by looking forward to a good response to the pandemic and justice for people of color in America.
When you heard the news, what went through your mind? What were you thinking?
Earlier today, I was so emotional, like America. I've been watching for the last 3 or 4 days, all day, all night, waiting for us to get that magical 270 or more. So it was emotional. It was joy. It was that we can now have a change for our children and grandchildren and our seniors. We can focus on a real plan for COVID-19. You know, I was hearing and watching the elections, but we were also watching all of the news stories about the number of people who are dying. We're hearing about how our numbers right here in Ohio are getting higher and higher. So in some ways, it was a relief. I know it's not over. I know that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris can't stop it, but at least they will educate us. They will meet with doctors and scientists, and they have a plan. So I think I was feeling relief and that help was on the way. And then as a Black woman, I was so excited because Kamala Harris is a friend and a colleague, and we just did a huge event for her with about 70 women right here in our district in Columbus, Ohio, did an event to show our support for the first woman that's African-American and Asian-American that's going to be the vice president.
People are in the streets dancing and celebrating. Is that surprising to you? I mean, seeing this.
It's not really surprising because we're in a new era of time. You know, the pandemic has 3 faces. It is the healthcare, but it's also the economic and the social justice. People have been in the streets for healthcare when women marched to keep our Affordable Care Act for those who are 26 and staying on their parents, or if you have pre-existing condition. But we have been in the streets because of a knee on our neck. Literally and figuratively, when we think about the disparities in healthcare and employment with women, when you think of Black women making less than their male counterparts, white male counterparts, to every dollar they make, when we think of the amount of work that we have to do to build back better, people are excited. I'm watching men on national TV cry and get emotional because now their children will have a better life.
Joyce Beatty talking to us earlier this evening. We appreciate her taking the time to do that. We're going to bring in a member of the 10 TV team of political experts to expand on the historic nature of this news today. Again, Dr. Brianna Mack is back. She's the assistant professor of politics and government at Ohio Wesleyan University. And thank you again for sticking with us. Let's just talk about the history behind this. President-elect Joe Biden, he's becoming this president to unseat a sitting president. That hasn't happened very often. And then we have Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, the first African-American and South Asian. Tell me just the historic aspect of this election, what it means.
So if we start with the President-elect Joe Biden, so the last time that we've seen a challenger seat an incumbent president, that was 1992 with Bill Clinton defeating incumbent H.W. Bush. And then with Vice President Kamala Harris, the fact that she's the first Black woman, she's the first South Asian woman, and as I mentioned earlier, 48 years after Shirley Chisholm launched her presidential campaign for the Democratic Party, being the first Black person, the first Black person, the first woman running for the Democratic ticket, and now there is a Black woman, a South Asian woman, going to be number 2 in the White House. That's a huge deal. If we also look at it 12 years after the election of the first Black man, this is very historical.
Absolutely, yes. Tell me, when we take a look at this, President-elect Biden will be speaking to the American people tonight, I believe 8 o'clock tonight. What do you think he needs to say to people? Because right now we have people on one side celebrating, on another side aren't ready to accept this. They're upset. The president is planning to file lawsuits. They're not ready to say, you know, oh, this is it. I think something could change. But what do you think that President-elect Biden should say or could say to the American people to kind of mute that?
Well, I know first he's going to talk about thanking his supporters. I think there will be a small moment of like celebration, acknowledgement of the monumentous event. But then I think he will probably talk about preaching calm, unity, patience, and I guess reminding folks that this is just the beginning, that come mid-January, it's time to get to work. And so it's not just everyone going back into their homes and waiting for his administration to like wave their magic wand and for things to get better, because there is no magic wand. There's a lot of legislative work that's ahead of us. There's going to be a lot of work for scientists and researchers, educators, our essential workers, our medical staff. We have a lot of work ahead of us to, you know, get the country back up and running and dealing with the pandemic,
and
international affairs, et cetera.
Yes, and Dr. Mack, I think it's important to point out, too, that even though President Trump wants to challenge this, he has every right to do that. He has every right to, you know, ask for recounts or double check the votes or things like that. That's not, you know, something just that's out of left field. A candidate, you know, has a right to do that, right?
they do. If there are, in fact, like within margins. So we know Georgia's likely going to do a recount. We talked about the fact that perhaps in Pennsylvania something's going to happen. Wisconsin has said it's going to cost $3 million. And there have already heard reports that the Republican Party is trying to raise money to get money from their supporters to actually pay for the costs for these investigations, for these recounts.
Okay. Well, Dr. Brianna Mack, thank you so much for hanging with us.
No
We
problem.
appreciate it. All right. Well, we are hearing from our local Democrats and Republicans, too. The Ohio Democratic Party released this statement saying, I want to thank every single person who made phone calls, chipped in support, and fought their hearts out for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. You all played an essential role in this historic election win. While Ohio didn't go blue in the presidential race, every single volunteer, activist, and Democratic voter kept the Trump campaign engaged and spending time and resources in Ohio. Senator Sherrod Brown had this to say. He says, President-elect Joe Biden's story is one of loss, perseverance, and strength. He is a good and wise man, and his election proves that our country is choosing truth, decency, and unity over lies and division. Our country needs his and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris's leadership now more than ever. And a former Republican Ohio Governor John Kasich spoke with CNN today, weighing in on their win. He actually endorsed Joe Biden's campaign.
I think that the other half of the country, in many respects, has felt as though they have not been listened to. They feel stuck economically, and it's going to be up to the Democrats to listen. Things like perhaps improving the earned income tax credit for working families, to think about what we can do to fix their schools, to think about what we can do to give them access to the internet. There's so many things that can be done to talk to that part of the country. And remember, this is broken down sort of, Anderson, as an urban and country division. And it isn't good enough to just declare a great victory. And I'm very pleased that Biden's won. I put everything I had on the line well, not everything, but a lot of things on the line to do this. I'm pleased he's there.
John Kasich there. We reached out for comment from Ohio Governor Mike DeWine. His spokesperson told us that he does not expect a comment from the governor today. Ohio's representative Republican Jim Jordan hasn't released an official statement reacting to the news, but we do know he was spotted at the Trump campaign headquarters in Arlington, Virginia this afternoon. Now, many leaders of different nations are tweeting their congratulatory messages to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says, our two countries are close friends, partners, and allies. We hope a relationship that's unique on the world stage. I'm really looking forward to working together and building on that with you both. And French President Emmanuel Macron said, the Americans have chosen their president. Congratulations, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We have a lot to do to overcome today's challenges. Let's work together. All right, that'll do it for us on our live stream. Remember, CBS News will have a special report tonight as President-elect Joe Biden is expected to give his victory speech from Wilmington, Delaware. And don't forget to tune in to 10 TV News after tonight's football game. So I want to thank you on behalf of myself and my counterpart, Andrew Kinsey, and the rest of the 10 TV News staff. Andrew may have something to say, a little close for us. Andrew, you still there?
Yeah, Yolanda is continuing to monitor the crowd here, and it's thinning out a bit from what we saw about an hour or so ago, but you can still hear the horns honking in the background. Still a very celebratory tone here among those who decided to come out here and to celebrate the president-elect Joe Biden today. Yolanda, it's quite important to note here that while, yes, President-elect Joe Biden appears to have this as the next leader of our country, there were so many others, millions of others, who did not vote for him. And the experts are telling me that that is going to be the challenge of this new administration, to win over those who did not vote for him and to unify our country during this divisive time.
Right. It is something he has promised to do. So he definitely has his work cut out for him. So, Andrew, thank you so much. for keeping an eye out on things there in downtown Columbus. Again, Joe Biden will be speaking tonight, President-elect, at 8 o'clock. That is scheduled. And for now, we are going to wrap up and want to thank you all for joining us. Have a great night, everybody.